I'll be starting fairly shortly, friends. Just gonna post in a couple of places. No, don't want to spam Shane's chat. However's, let's do this. And I'm just gonna quit out of Discord here. And hey, Rev, what's up, man? So let's switch over to the single cam focus and let's get started. It is Thursday afternoon, August 29th, and I am Rob, that developer dad, and I am building for myself and maybe for some other people, who knows, a application that's going to help me when I am at my gaming table and my other players ask me, what is that shopkeeper's name, or what is the tavern server's name, or what have you. And I'm not good at coming up with that stuff on the fly. So I've built an application that runs locally on a fairly beefy Windows laptop, but it hasn't got a battery in it. It's old. It's like from 2016 or 2017. There's no appreciable GPU in it. I don't believe it's got a battery, so I'd have to plug it in, and it's not, the keyboard's jacked up, so it only works well when I like remote desktop into it. So I'm putting it up in Azure, and I've actually shown this thing to a few people, and they really like it, like to the point of would pay a monthly subscription charge to have access to this thing. So I have the Blazor app. It's running, all that good stuff. And now I need to figure out a way to limit access to the people who have paid for it. So let me flip over to my main screen. And it's currently reloading. Here we go. Load. And I would bet dollars to donuts that my database has gone offline. And I'm going to need to go over to here. Here's the app. I got to come over here. Tell it who I am. I am not ready to dive into application instances or anything like that yet, Rev. Right now, while I'm in demo mode, or almost ready for demo mode, I'll be running it as sort of in free, using the free services rather than using any of the paid versions of the Azure services. But once I've got interest, I will absolutely start upgrading and scaling up the service plans and so on and so forth. Right now, the database is resuming, and as soon as it flips over to active status, I'll make that change. Now, we're going to have a couple of times during this afternoon's stream where I actually move the camera focus back to just me instead of the screen share, because I'm going to be typing some sensitive information into various configuration files and stuff like that. And the database says it's online, so let's go ahead and hit the reload link. And it's got to reload the app. Yeah, the free tier, when they say it's not for production purposes, they're not joking. I would be embarrassed to ask for people's money with the app performing in its current state. Pro tip, don't try to breathe your coffee. Coffee goes down one pipe, air goes down the other, and you should never let anything go down the air pipe that isn't air. Ah, goodness. Pardon me. All right, so we can actually view these guys. And I've got a few little UI cleanup thingies that I want to do here. But let's see here. I am using right now the Azure App Service, the free tier, a Azure SQL database, also the free tier, so it keeps going to sleep if it's not being talked to. And I think I get like 100,000 virtual CPU seconds a month for free, and my first 32 gigs of storage for free. So that ain't bad. And then, of course, I'm using Azure OpenAI and Azure Entra B2C. I'm not going to run out of the free grant on B2C until I am a very happy guy, because I can have up to like 50,000 objects in the free tier of B2C before I start paying for it. And once I get 50,000 users, I'm not worrying about monthly Azure charges anymore. I'm not worrying about looking for work anymore at that point. So we can generate our AI description, and this goes a whole lot faster than it used to. We're down to a couple of seconds from a minute or two. And of course we can save. And as you can see, there's not a lot of UX like state transitions or anything like that going on. Like once the character's been saved, I should probably gray that out. But we can go back to the list, and we're looking for Leora Thalor, and here she is, a retired half-elf cook who apparently started life as a noble. All right, neat. So, how do we get a login experience for this thing? Well, this morning, I set up my Azure B2C tenant. Whoops. Now let's just pull this up here and make sure my email address isn't exposed, because I don't want to be on the internet with a hole in my shorts and a leg up and stuff hanging out where people can see it. And I created an app registration, and I can show you this screen because there's no secrets or anything like that. And I know I created an app reg. Here we are. And so we've got the GMTools application. I've got my client ID and the object ID and the tenant ID and all that stuff. And we'll be filling in more of these things as we go. Now, what's the application ID URI? That's a new one to me. Managed application in local directory is GMTools application. Okay. So we actually need to make some changes to the Blazor app to be able to take advantage of this. Now, we're going to need some information off of this screen. We're also going to need some information. Oops, I went too far. Let's go back. And let's go home. Here's the DevDat apps. And oh gosh. Is it in here? Here we go. So here's my tenant. Security related service changes to Connect Sync and Connect Health. I'm not worried about that because I don't have an on-prem Active Directory server. Microsoft Entra Admin Center. I may actually get into that. but I'm not that worried. And I should probably take a look at things in this secure score at some point. So manage users. I should have a place where I go to user flows. Identity governance, user settings, properties. External identities. ADB to C to configure your application. I'm not worried about that. Come on, take me back. Back, you silly booger. Fine. Where is it? There's app registrations, user settings. Users can register applications, restrict non-admin users from creating tenants. Users can create security groups. Oh, we're going to lock all of this stuff down. All of it. Your school account with LinkedIn. Show keep users signed in. Yeah, all of that stuff's getting fixed. Overview. Am I even in the right place? Simpler integrated experience. And I need user flows. Authentication in Python app, set up sign up and sign in with a Microsoft account. Azure web app by using Active Directory, reliability, yeah. All right, we'll get there. I actually have a tutorial in one of these windows. Or is it in here? Here it is. Right here in Edge. So I've actually gone through a lot of this tutorial offline because there's some sensitive stuff that I had to set up. I've already created my tenant and registered the web application. I've created that. I've created the application identity provider. We're just going to use email for now. Once I've come up with a name and some branding and everything like that, I'll sign up for federated sign-in with social providers and the user flows. So I think what I'm going to need to do is close this. Boop. And I'm going to come over here to the app and I'm going to open this in a new tab. There we go. Tell it who I am. And I need to come into here and open the B2C tenant. Tell it who I am. And I realize that my OPSEC practices are not fantastic. So I need to create a user flow. And where do those live? Here we go, under policies. I've got a few of them. I have created the ones that I need. So next up on this very special episode of That Developer Dad Builds an App, I did set up and sign in. I've created the new user flow. And I've selected which claims to collect and return in the tokens. And there's my user flow. I already have a Blazor server application. I've done all of this setup, which is what I want. Now I need a redirect URI in the app registration. So for that, I'm just going to pull this over here. And I've got to come into launch settings. I'm just going to do this for my local machine. So I'll grab this. Copy that. Yep, that's the only one I need. And I need to go over to my app registration now. So here we are, app regs. Isn't listed as an owner of any applications in this directory. Whatever. GMTools application. And I need to add a redirect URI. Okay, where is my tutorial? And again, I'm reaching for a third monitor, but my poor little MacBook won't support multiple, more than one additional monitor. So all apps, I've got it. Add a redirect URI, I clicked that. And now I need to add a platform. So add a platform, we're gonna go web. And we're gonna add that / and I need to get the exact wording of this, SignIn -OIDC. SignIn -OIDC. Open ID Connect is what OIDC stands for. And I don't have a logout URL. I'm not going to worry about it. We are going to generate access tokens and ID tokens. We're probably not going to use the access tokens anywhere because this isn't a JavaScript calling into APIs type thing. It's a server app, but if I ever add any WebAssembly components to the Blazor app, or I decide that I want to convert this to a JavaScript-based SPA or something like that, single page application, I'll need those access tokens because I'll move from like an ID token authentication scheme over to a bearer token authentication scheme. And basically what I do at that point is stop hosting the Blazor app and host a React or a Vue or an Angular app instead. But for now, we're going to stick with Blazor until I have a very compelling reason not to. All right, and when we deploy the application to the production website, I'm going to need to add another redirect URL to this list. So let's configure. Now, right now, I've got the actual app service hosted app to, I'm basically protecting it with my other AD account, and it only allows me, the owner of the tenant, into the application at this point. So redirect URIs, the URIs we will accept as destinations. After successfully authenticating and signing out users, the redirect you send to the request should match the one listed here, also referred to as a reply URL. Okay, and we've got implicit grant settings enabled. I should migrate URLs. I don't need to add a URI. Front channel logout, there isn't one. And access tokens, ID tokens. Supported account types, accounts in any provider or organizational directory, blah, 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 blah. Is there any other stuff that I need to mess with here? App instance property lock, not worried about that. Enable the following mobile and desktop flows. What's behind the yes button? No, I'm not. I'm going to leave that unaltered. Okay. I think that's all I got to do. Account accounts. For an existing registration, use the manifest editor. Certain properties may cause errors for personal accounts. Okay. And I think that's all I got to do. Is that it? I've got, yeah, that's it. That's all I need. Owners, view and edit this app reg, admin privileges, may manage any application. You know what? I'm going to add myself as an owner, but I'm going to do that off screen. And select there. Overview of the app reg. Good. Next step is I got to update my app settings.json file. Now I'm going to flip views here just for a second while I hide the secret pieces because they're secrets. I'm just going to hide lmconfig and the connection strings. Excuse me. And we'll go back to main screen turn on. So I've hidden the connection strings in the lmconfig. Groovy. I'm not going to be showing my underpants in public. And I need to add this big honkin' piece of JSON. There's that. So I need some information from Azure. I need my Azure B2C domain name, my application ID, and my sign-up policy. So I'm going to pop over back to B2C. And the instructions say my domain name is developer.apps.onmicrosoft.com. The only part I need is the developer.apps. So flip that over here and just replace everything inside the wiggly braces. Ta-da! Next thing I got to change is the application or client ID. So for that, I'm going to come in here, open this up. I'm going to copy this application ID. Bloop. And that can go into that space. And that's just an object ID. I'm not worried about it. And I need to update my sign-up policy and my domain. So for the domain, I grab this guy and paste him in here. And I don't feel bad about showing this GUID because unless you can log into my tenant, you ain't doing anything with it. So I'm going to come back to B2C and I got to go into user flows for my sign up, sign in policy ID. And I got to grab, oh gosh. I just want the name. So what I'll do, I'll just pull this over here. Excuse me. And I grab that. So to grab that, the easiest way is to just pop open the screen, highlight this, copy it, come back to Visual Studio, And there we go. And we save all of that stuff. I do have policies set up for reset password and edit profile, but I'm not going to mess with those just yet. I don't want to goof around with that stuff right now. Next step, updating the Blazor program. Now, before I do this, there's another step I should take. And it is to set up in my app service some environment variables. And I don't feel terrible about showing this process because I'm not sharing any heavy-duty secrets or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to add name Azure B2C instance. And the value is that. And is it Azure AD BC and not Azure AD B2C? I'm just calling it Azure B2C. I suppose I should just full on. No, I'm going to leave the AD out because they're trying to transition away from AD to this new Entra branding. But let's make it a deployment slot setting. What the heck? Apply. Boop. And we'll add Azure B2C app ID. And the value shall be, yeah, it's AD as in Active Directory, not add as in give me another one. Here we go. It'll go here. F it, we'll make it a slot setting. I don't have access to slots here, but whatever. Callback path, that is darn near constant, but I should probably include it. Nah. Copy that. Pop up here. Add app domain. Duh. There we go. And I should probably say this. And I can turn these other things into environment variables if I have to later. Azure B2C, sign up, sign in, policy. Paste that and apply it. Okay. So we've got all that information, right? Grand. Next step. We got to add ourselves some nugget packages. So, dependencies, packages. Let's see what all we have already. We just have extensions logging app service, extensions logging console, ASP.NET Core components, WebAssembly, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Manage NuGet package. And the article I am working from, which is this. And Nightbot, I am the owner of this stream. Don't you slap me with a link share problem. Silly Nightbot. I need to add Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.Jot. Yes. And it will pull in all of its dependencies. And yeah, don't show that again. Go away. Yes, just accept the damn license agreements. I also need OIDC, install, accept, as well as Microsoft, gotta spell it right, Microsoft dot identity dot web. All right, there's that. And that's the latest stable. Web APIs to use. Microsoft Identity Platform. This does give me MCell, right? Holy crap. Okay, that's all .NET Framework. .NET Framework. Net 6, Net 7, Net 8. And that'll give me all the stuff. Hopefully it won't frig up my system.text.json reference. But that's okay. Install. Oh, Rev, I didn't see when you reacted with the ah ha ha ha, but I'm sure I said something that was relatable. And now I need web. Oh, when I was arguing with Nightbot, yeah. Yeah, I loosened its restrictions the other day because I have another follower who likes to come in and hang out and like drop all caps things and emojis. And they're very expressive, but Nightbot keeps slapping them with, holds and delays and yelling at them for just expressing themselves. And they're not being over the top or offensive or anything like that. And it wasn't fair to them. So I had to go and loosen my restrictions. Now, September went in the other day and preemptively turned up the sexual harassment filters on my Twitch channel for me, which is great. It hasn't been a problem yet. I hope it never becomes a problem because, to quote Black Panther, we don't do that here. All right, I think I have all of the things. I also, don't like punching down. Like, humor is good. Even ribald humor is good. But let's never punch down. I do not like it. Okay, added my references. I'm in program CS. And here's some code that it wants me. Well, I've got a lot of this code already. And it wants me to add all of this crazy stuff. And I don't think I need to do all of that. Or, well, no, I do need to do all of that, but I'm not going to do all of that in static void main. Because piling static void main with all the things, not so low key, makes me crazy. I would much rather than have a static void main that's like 300 lines of code long, just purely for readability purposes. Do things like use private static methods. Excuse me. So for this stuff here, I'm gonna take it another step further before I start adding the authentication. So I'm going to go private statique web application builder configure logging, and it's going to take in the web application builder. And I'm going to call it builder. Got to give the parameters a name. Nobody likes nameless parameters. And all I'm going to do is grab these, cut, paste, return builder, save. Private static ilogger program create startup logger web application builder I'm going to cut that, create startup logger, var logger equals that, return logger. Boom. And that is builder dot conf builder equals configure logging. Yep, good. Set up configuration, create services. All right, and configure logging, bad terminology. I'm going to rename that to setup logging. That's better. Create startup logger, dig it, setup configuration, create services. All right. Now, over here in the sample code that I'm going to be working from, here's that builder.build, and it looks like an awful lot of the stuff that I need to put in is above there. So let's look through this, and I really wish the font size was better here. And environment variables, we've got that. Add user secrets, I'm not messing with that right yet. And user components, interactive server components, Microsoft Identity Consent Handler, add cascading authentication state. I'll probably need that. So I likely need to, down here where it's doing the add Razor components, add interactive server components, add interactive WebAssembly components, I need to call another extension method. Dot add Microsoft Identity consent handler. It doesn't like that much, and let's make sure wrap and align call chain. Oh, bite me. I don't need to do that. It probably doesn't see one of the packages that I need. Identity Web UI. All right, where does the identity consent handler live? How about using Microsoft.identity client? Does not contain add Microsoft identity consent handler. All right, you know what? When the IDE ain't finding it, well, there's another thing I can do here, and that's add these usings instead. What's this complaining about? Oh, stop it. Save. Fine. We'll do this as a separate line for now. Builder dot services dot add add Microsoft. Oh, come on. Here we go. Microsoft identity consent handler. Such silly. Very painful. Wow. Save. You know what? I'm going to close that to get it to stop complaining. I'm going to build. And come on. Here we go. And it does not contain. Sometimes Visual Studio. Sometimes you are the silliest of geese. We'll just do it this way. That's so weird and goofy. No overload method for use. Semantic kernel provider takes 2 arguments. You're full of crap. Because I set that up to take in the host environment last night. Build, clean. It's still cleaning. Rebuild. That's a total lie. Because as soon as I open the dependency builder and Roslyn gives her head a shake, that error message is going to clear. Because Roslyn's smart, but sometimes she is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. All right, so got my map razor components. This is up here. I have Microsoft Identity Consent Handler. And I feel like I can do this. Builder equals set up configure then configure app sec. Pass in the builder. I'm gonna grab this. That's getting cut. Go down to create services. Shrinky dinky do. Private static. And configure app sec web application builder. I got to give it a return type of web application builder. I know it doesn't return a value yet. I'll get there. Return builder. Bam. Add Microsoft Identity Consent Handler. All right. Now I need to do builder dot services dot add cascading authentication state. I believe I already add an HTTP client up in here. Add scope, rule set access, deck simulator, dice bag, SQL Server access, townsfolk manager, semantic kernel provider, character workloads, NPC service proxy. I don't add any of that stuff. That's peculiar. That's very peculiar. All right, well, I suppose I should add those things. And I guess I should add them up here. Unless I'm adding them up in here. Let me double check real quick. Nope. All right, back to create services. And builder dot services dot add HTTP client. Builder dot services dot add HTTP context accessor. I'm definitely going to need that. Builder dot services dot add scoped of HTTP context accessor. Groovy. Save. And is it I? It says I. What happens if I take the I off? Does it wig? Doesn't look like it wigs. Scope service type specified in blah, 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 blah. All right. Back down to configure AppSec. Builder dot services dot add authentication. And this is a multi-step operation and can be quite the production. And I need to pass in OpenID connect defaults dot authentication scheme. There we go. Dot add Microsoft Identity Web App with options and I believe that's the end of this multi-compound statement, but I'm going to scroll over here. Yeah, looks like that's that. So, right here it says builder dot configuration dot bind. Oh, not in love with this. Azure AD B2C to options. Now this is a thing. Oh, I got to change option to options. This is a thing that I've never really wrapped my head around, and I'm certain that there's something special I need to do with my environment variables to get them to map to the equivalent properties in appsettings.json. And I'm just not sure what that is, and I haven't done a pile of experimentation with it. There's another way I would much rather manage the configuration for my applications, especially when there's multiple configuration bits and pieces and so on. And I think I may actually just get into that maybe tomorrow. I'll demonstrate the way I prefer to handle configuration. Especially when I've got disparate ways of storing and then building up that configuration. So, options.events equals, I see. Options.events equals new open ID connect events. Bam. On redirect to identity provider equals async CTX I think I got to put a semicolon on that guy. There we go. And I'm just going to grab all of this guy's code, paste it in here, and explain it. We can shrink that. So this is invoked before redirecting to Entra, in our case, to authenticate. And we can do things like setting things and persistent through the authentication process, like he says. Excuse me. But in this case, we're just going to await task.yield, which essentially just returns flow back to the main thread. Comma. On authentication failed. Oops. I got to do this. Come out to the end. Equals. And it's another async CTX thingy. And raised on a failed login attempt. And await task.yield raising an event here for the security for a security system would be appropriate. And I'm thinking of Timmy Turner's dad. I would put my security code here if I had one. I'll have one eventually. And on signed out callback redirect, let's grab this guy. Let's grab the whole thing. Copy that. Paste it here. And that does all the things. Let's grab the next event. On ticket received is a big one. This one will have some stuff to talk about. Because it's big. So, on ticket received. And I assume that the ticket received thing is where it's talking about we've received an authentication token of some sort. And if our context, and I need to say CTX as opposed to, oh no, CTXT. All right. Let's undo that change, and I'm going to rename to CTX. There, that's better. And I'm going to rename to CTX. Good. Now, to dynamic list async, I assume there is a missing thing here. For some reason, it doesn't want to offer system link dynamic core. Let's pull that in. Using system.link.dynamic.core. Where do you live? All right, fine. Keep your secrets. Dependencies. NuGet packages. And do we have a system.link.dynamic? Core. Okay, this is ZZZ Project, Steph Hinrath, Microsoft, Scott Goo. Okay. Microsoft Assembly for the dotNet 4 dynamic language functionality. Let's go ahead and grab it. Install. Close. And pop over here. System.link.dynamic core. All right, and good. The error messaging disappeared. Cancel that. I wanted to save, silly. There we go. Shrink. And back here, focus gets that, and I'm going to hit Control minus to take us back to where we were. All right, it's converting the claims on the incoming principal into a dynamic list asynchronously. That's our collection of claims. Identity provider, call claims first default. See that type is thing. Value object identifier. Value email address. Azure B2C flow, auth time, display name, access token. All right. I'm not returning all of these things, but I'm not going to sweat it. And then, of course, we do an await task.yield at the end. And that's that for configuring this part. So I'm going to do a shrinky-dinky-do on that. This is where we set up the authentication goop, including the reading of the incoming claims ticket. And when we get to testing this stuff, I'll be dropping breakpoints in there to see what's coming in. Now we add builder.asServices.add controllers with views bonk dot add Microsoft Identity UI. Pow. And then we return the builder, and I save my file. I swing up here. We've configured our AppSec, and the next line is builder.build. Right here. So use WebAssembly debugging. Okay. Use HTTPS redirection, use static files. I guess I need, because I'm using controllers and views for the authentication workloads, I guess I have to go app.useRouting. I hope this doesn't screw up the way this works. App.useAuthentication. App.useAuthorization. After that, we app.map controllers. Use anti-forgery. Set up the Razor components. Adding additional assemblies. And we run. And I guess it's FAFO time. Let's pop in here. Well, maybe it's FAFO time. I have to add something to the imports. And I got to add. Oops. Copy that. Here's my imports. Components. Imports Razor. Come on, open sesame. And I got to add that. Save. Go to the main layout page. And I don't want to dick around with adding an authorized view versus a not authorized view yet. think instead I'll add it to my nav menu. Nav link, nav class, flex column, document query selector, blah, blah, blah. And game runner helper, navbar, dark. Okay, so this is getting into having to restyle the navigation bar, but let's add authorized view. And authorized. We'll say hello at context.user.identity. I'm reading all of this off of the tutorial page, by the way. I'm not pulling this nonsense out of my head. .name, cool. And a href equals Microsoft identity /account /SignIn out. Log out. And if not authorized, I'll just grab this. Come here. Come here. Copy. Paste. There we go. And I'll just say sign in. And I think that's about it. Save. And I've been going for a little more than an hour, 10 minutes, or almost an hour, 10 minutes. I'm going to push play on this, and whether it works or not, I'm going to say good afternoon. But I intend to have the basic sign up integrated into my application and running at least locally on my developer machine by the time we convene tomorrow morning. So here's sign in, and let's see what this does. Oh, hello. Let's sign up now. And let's use that. Go ahead and send me a verification code. And I'm going to need to open up my mail client. And I'll just pull that over the other screen and run down to that developer dad. And I got a nice little email on behalf of developer dad apps with a verification code. So let's copy the verification code, paste that, verify code. Cool. Display name. Let's go with devdad. And I'll just say, given name is that, developer dad, create. Please wait while we process your information. Password saved. And what's this say over here? Hello, DevDad. And I can log out now. So, you may think that's good enough, but we can take it a little bit further. And we're going to do that tomorrow. I've got a login experience working. I want to pop over to Azure. Here we are. Deathpacks, how's it going, man? I found a really great tutorial to follow. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I still fall back on tutorials, man. Every darn time. So I've got things working while I've got things in appsettings.developer.json. I'm going to need to do a little bit of work to make configurations a little bit more easier to reason about. But I went through this tutorial. I integrated the authentication flows and stuff like that into my application. I've got some styling to do, obviously. But yeah, that seemed to work. And tomorrow we're going to explore what kind of information I can pull out of these authentication tokens and use in my application. But let's go to here in my AD BTC tenant. Here we go. Come on. All right, I'm in my DevDad apps. And I need to go to here. And let's go to users. And here is DevDad. Moo-ha-ha. Now, the next stuff I need to figure out is what kind of groups have I got? GMTools paid users. Okay, cool. So when somebody signs up, I'm going to want to add them automatically to a new group. And let's make it a security group. Yeah, we're going to make it a security group. And it is going to be app GMTools users. Members of this group have access to the GMTools application's free features. And membership type is assigned, create. And let's pop in here. And members, because having to do this manually every time somebody signs up or changes their stuff is going to be a pain in the neck. But I'm going to add DevDad to GMTools users. And let's go back to paid users. And I am just going to add myself. I believe I'm already a member of this. Let's just make me, my account, a member of paid users. Now, tomorrow, we're not going to start using those membership things to affect aspects or areas of our Blazor app. We're just going to try to get them to display on a temporary Blazor page that we set up. But before we do that, I want to get the login experience deployed up to the Azure App Service and functioning up there. And there's a little bit of behind the scenes work that I'll have to do. to use environment variables for things instead of the app settings, but I'll get that done offline and then explain it when we start tomorrow morning. And then we're going to start interrogating user contexts and pulling out group memberships and so on and so forth. And we'll figure out what we got to do that. And then I want to figure out how to automate adding members to different types of security groups, ideally from outside influence, like a webhook. Yeah, Key Vault. I've thought about using Key Vault for these kinds of things, Pax, and honestly, I don't really need it. Because of the way I've got this thing set up, I'm not even using usernames and passwords when this app connects to my SQL server. I'm using Azure Managed Identities. Same deal with the OpenAI service. So I don't have any of those secrets to store in a Key Vault. And I'm using system assigned identities, no less. So I don't even get to see the credentials. And Azure rotates the keys and the passwords for me behind the scenes and takes care of all of that management for me. It's really a much nicer experience than app registrations and so on. In fact, I created a credential for the Entra app registration for the Blazor application. I didn't even need it. I just had to provide the client ID. and it just worked. So that's pretty sweet. There are some things, of course, where a key vault would make sense, but that'd be like if I were storing encryption keys and stuff like that. And I really don't need to do that yet because I'm not going to be storing any PII in the SQL database. The way I've got this thing working right now and the way I want to keep it is all personally identifying information is in Entra. All financial information, that's going to be, oh gosh, what's their name? Not Swipe, Stripe. I really think I'm going to go with Stripe as my payment provider. And the entire organization of Stripe has more development power and more collective IQ than me by myself. So I'm going to let Stripe manage all of that security crap for me. I don't even want to see people's debit card or credit card numbers. I never want to see that. So yeah, on-prem apps and databases. Yeah, I've never worked with data lakes or Oracle Cloud, but I mean, an API call is an API call. And yeah, typically you'll use like the daemon grant where you've got a client ID and an API key. Now, doing an API call as your app on behalf of a user, that's where things get weird. I'm really not in love with those types of things. I'd much rather do that imperatively with my code, where I would pass the user identity ID, just the identity ID, up to my resource access layer and make it one of the filtering criteria where, object owner ID equals logged in user's ID and not let anybody else update or destroy those objects or whatever. Eventually, I might think about adding a more sophisticated object permissions system to this where I could create some NPCs and make them public, or I could create some NPCs and share them with other users that I know, and then they would see them and be able to read them, but not edit those ones. Eventually, there might be like a copy this, or I want to use this NPC in my game kind of thing. Yeah, service bus message routing and data transformations. That's what I'm mostly used to at when I'm in a job scenario. Um, I haven't done a lot with Service Bus itself, but I've designed and implemented a lot of systems on RabbitMQ, which uses a very similar, almost identical um, pattern as far as topics, exchanges, queues, etc. I really actually enjoy the features in RabbitMQ more so than what I've read about Service Bus, because I believe Service Bus is topic only, and they don't have the concepts of things like a fan out queue. Oh, Kafka. That's a whole nother animal. Um, I haven't taken on the wrestling match with Kafka yet. I've read a few articles. I can almost reason about what it does, but I haven't run into a use case personally where I would need to use it. I could see Kafka being incredibly useful if I were doing an event sourced type system where Kafka would store each change to an object instance, and then I would replay everything in the Kafka, I guess, replica or queue or whatever. I can't remember the exact language. Replay all of those events against an instance of a thing and just let that get me to my current state, and then perhaps store snapshot current state into an RDBMS. And then the next time I have to query Kafka, I just ignore all of the events prior to the snapshot time. And so I instantiate my snapshot, ask Kafka, hey, give me all of the events for this object ID post this time, and replay them against my my current instance. But that just feels like an awful lot of cognitive load for something that people really don't need all that often. I feel like the use cases where that would actually matter are incredibly limited, not nearly as common as the number of implementations of that pattern in the world. I have a feeling it's being used in a lot of places where it just doesn't have to be used. And it's a perfect example of over-engineering something. So we're in a good spot here. I've got create an account. I've got sign into my account. I didn't even get to pick my password, come to think of it. That's weird. Edge remembered it for me. I think it was Edge. No, it was Safari. But let's see here. That's the Azure instance. Edge remembers it. Yeah. So Edge has it over here. But yeah, we've made some really good progress this afternoon. And tomorrow we're gonna probably throw together a temporary Blazor page to experiment with the kind of information we can get back from from the identity system that we're using. And then we can figure out how to apply that to the various objects in the system, improve our loading, or not necessarily improve the loading experience, but increase the amount of data that's coming down with these objects, which will set us up for improving our filtering and set us up for being able to safely edit these characters as we create them. So I'm gonna actually celebrate my progress this evening. I will allow myself a beer, and yeah, this has been good. And thank you all for hanging out and joining me on this adventure. There, I'll just highlight that because I haven't got any styling on there. And I will see you all next time. Blazor diagrams. I've not monkeyed with Blazor diagrams. I'm not sure what those are. Okay, node-based diagrams. Again, you're using terminology that I've got definitions for, but I don't have an actual mapping for those terms in the context of Blazor because I am quite new to using Blazor. Um, and node-based diagrams, that could mean a lot of things, like Node.js, or are we talking about um, more like a graph type diagram where we have edges and nodes and so on and so forth, that kind of stuff? I'm not sure. That's a discussion for another time. Okay, graph nodes. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, again, I haven't done a whole lot of work with GraphDB or Graph Concepts or anything like that. I haven't in my professional life come across situations where it's necessary. I'd love to learn, but it's so far down my prioritized list of things to learn that it's just not even on my radar right now. It looks super handy. I see a lot of places saying, "Hey, we need people to understand GraphDB," and honestly, I've talked to people who were talking about using GraphDB for this and that and the other thing, and I'm like, "Are you building a social network? Are you calculating paths along a map? Well, then why?" Are you building automated taxonomy and ontology systems to eventually drive a machine learning model for natural language processing from scratch? And yeah, okay. Generating visual representations of connections between systems, that makes sense. If you've got a bunch of ARM templates or even just a Excel spreadsheet that you can export as a CSV with lists of machines and systems and which systems are on which machines and which systems talk to which other systems and so on, things like that, that'd be a great use case to just be able to pull in that data and go, here's a visualization of your complex topography or whatever. That'd be really cool. Um, but yeah, I mean, we're talking about people that are doing forms over data requiring GraphDB and GraphQL and all of that stuff. And I'm like, no, you don't. You don't need that. You have some fields, you have a database, you have some reports. The reports read from the database. You need the fields on the web page to get pushed into the database safely and accurately. And that's all you need. You don't need GraphQL for that. You need a secure system. That's it. And I think a lot of places they list the technologies that they're using or that they want to use based off of whatever Gartner is yammering on about this month or this quarter. I've seen an awful lot of places attempt to do Gartner-driven development, or even worse, resume-driven development, where a senior developer will come in and say, "Hey, I want to switch everything over to use Couchbase instead of SQL Server." Why? Because I want to put it on my resume. Well, so do a side project with Couchbase. If you can't justify the benefits to the organization and the software that we're writing of using Couchbase instead of SQL Server and justify that it's going to give us more benefit than the cost of migrating our 20-year-old web forms application to use Couchbase instead of SQL Server, build it at home, man. That's the attitude I've gotten to. So yeah, this has been a good stream. I gotta bounce. I will catch you all tomorrow. Have yourselves a good night. Happy coding.